Impact. Living in a memory.
Hey, I am Jeff Christian, and you are in Impact. Today is the first of our episodes, and we're really excited you're here. And I'm a former IFBB pro, bodybuilder, business owner, and entrepreneur. And to my right...
Hey guys, I'm Kevin Broderick. I am a multiple business owner, entrepreneur. We're here on the Impact Podcast to basically interview people who we feel is creating a huge impact in society, and people just overall that we feel are interesting to talk to and have a great story.
Yeah. So today we have in one of my favorite people on the planet. His name is Sergeant Josh Hemmings. Now, Josh has not done any interviews at all since coming home. He has been asked numerous times to give interviews, and just to be quite honest, Josh is a little nervous today, and that's okay because this is a big deal for him to tell his story. So, Josh, we want to thank you for coming in and tell us a little bit about your background, who you are, where you came from, and just tell us who you are, man.
Well, first off, I'm a child of God, first and foremost, and saved by grace through faith. And as far as my background goes, I grew up not too far from where we are now in Snellville, Georgia. Had two great parents. I mean, I was raised well. Yeah. They did get married to each other twice. So, but other than that, I mean, they raised me well. They brought me up in, a good church. And so that's kind of where I'm from. And my sister, I have a little sister that didn't come along until 15 years later. So we have quite the age difference. But she's great too. Beautiful young lady. As far as my immediate family, I'm so blessed to have a family to include my wife, a family of 4. I've got a 14-year-old, Addie. She just started high school, and then I've got my 11-year-old who just went into middle school. And then a 5th grader, Jeremiah, he's last year in elementary school. And then we have our baby Selah, and she's in 2nd. And they're what I live for nowadays.
Awesome. Hey, yeah, let's do this real quick. Josh, you brought some stuff in that was really kind of cool, and wanted to, if we could see that stuff. You brought some things with you. And so if you want to grab that stuff real quick, let's take a look at that. And that's really, really cool stuff. And then we can kind of jump off from there. I know Kevin has some questions. I have some questions. And we'd love to just talk to you about that.
Well, it was mainly a gift to you individuals for just having me on. This is a little background behind it and why it's a gift. It's... So back, if any of you like history, back in World War I, the United States Marines, the tip of the spear, were fighting in a battle, I believe it's called Battle of Wood, in Germany. And the Germans said that we fought so fiercely that they gave us the nicknames Teufelhunden, which means they fought like devil dogs. Wow. And the French agreeing gave us something to wear, and that on our uniforms, and only when you're a part of 6th Marine Regiment do you rate to wear it. And this is it's rare, even if you join the Marine Corps, to get one. Wow. So this was it was special. It's a token of my appreciation for me to you guys.
Can we see that?
Yeah.
Hold that up.
It typically goes over the shoulder, over your...
Can you show us how it kind of goes?
Yeah. You'd, like say your dress blues would be, depending on what, if you're wearing metal, dress blue alphas or bravos, it's just... Right. Alphas, you got your medals and all that. Bravos, you got your medals in like ribbon style. Yeah. So it just depends. But you wear it on your left, I believe it's your left shoulder. It's been a while. Right. And there's a little eagle globe and anchor. It kind of just loops into, and it just kind of hangs off.
Hangs down.
Yeah, it just hangs, kind of goes through the shoulder and hangs
Yeah,
down, kind
face
of
the
like
camera
that.
and let it see you real quick. There you go.
Kind of just hangs down like that.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
that's neat. Man.
I would not be in regulation as far as measurement right now,
Yeah.
but it's been a while.
Not as much
Man,
PT, right?
Right.
Forget they have
Right,
regulations like
right, and I'll be honest with you, I got very lucky to get this because I'd say 85% of my Marine Corps career was spent in 1st Battalion, 8th Marines.
Yeah.
And that's where a bulk of my career came from. I actually I was only with 6th Marine Regiment for maybe 4 or 5 months, and that was basically I was processing guys that were either were banged up from our last tour and were no longer non-deployable, guys that were in trouble or just kind of doing busy work until my retirement paperwork went through, and so I had to go basically since I was no longer deployable with 1st Battalion, 8th Marines. I did several tours with them anyway, so but got banged up, and then so basically you're when you're non-deployable and you're in an infantry unit and you're hooking and jabbing every day, there's really not much purpose if they're trying to retire you out.
Right.
And I'm sure there could have been if I vaguely remember, there could have been some non-deployable options and some certain things that I would have been able to do, but I had gotten so ingrained with deploying, you kind of get
With like combat.
you kind of get it's a unfillable void with a lot of vets that have been over more than once or twice. It's something about, I don't know if it's losing buddies or friends and you just constantly wanting that need for revenge.
Dopamine.
And of course that adrenaline rush. Yeah, absolutely. I mean that.
There's also the camaraderie, just like your brothers.
Absolutely. That's what I miss most in the civilian world is I still talk to my brothers. They know who they are. If they're watching, shout out to them. They're my war dogs. We're sworn to each other's family for life. So if their families ever need anything, I'm a phone call away. They know I'll be there in 48 hours, and the same goes for them. So
Now, this isn't hyperbole either. Because Josh, how many tours did you do, Josh, and where?
well, I did 4 tours total, but I want to keep it at 3 because that's where I saw the combat as far as combat goes. So I was deployed twice to Afghanistan and once to Iraq, and I was also out and I served. They call it a deployment, but I call it serving. I served out in Okinawa. When you think of like a deployment, I always just think a combat deployment.
Sure.
So. And some deployments were pretty good and chillaxed, and others were like the Wild Wild West. I mean, it was something every single day, and it's odd when you take on something like that. And I became kind of a jack of all trades when I was in the Marine Corps because I started out as a communications guy, just a regular wire dog is what we used to call it. So I was in a comm platoon. I did. There was an operation. I failed the NDOC to get attached to 3rd Recon 2 times, and at the time you could only try out, I think, a 3rd time. Well, the first time I believe I was hungover. Second time I fractured my ankle, and then I got it on the 3rd. Yeah. So, And all I did over there was just, running gun loops and stuff like that. But my primary time in Okinawa, where I was communications, doing, going to Australia, training the Aussies, went to South Korea 3 times, Philippines. We hit up Thailand, a lot of Asian countries,
Right.
and then we were mainly stationed in Okinawa, Japan.
Right.
So, to take leave, it was a really expensive plane ticket, so I just took leave to Tokyo and went to mainland Japan. And we took a little vacation to Mount Fuji, of which was like a vacation, but they were really just conditioning us to hike Mount Fuji. So that was, a really cool experience. Had some good times over there, great times over there, but nothing compared to my brothers at 1st Battalion, 8th Marines. That goes from the infantry side, from the communications side to, there's just, I was blessed to get involved to where I met a lot of different people from a lot of different jobs and a lot of different backgrounds.
Right.
And a lot of different ranks too, because I was one of the very few black belt martial arts instructors there. So that was that was a fun belt to earn.
What
And basically, what it's called is Marine Corps Mixed Martial Arts.
Oh, really? Okay.
So basically, the fundamentals of it are, your boxing, your wrestling, a little bit of jiu-jitsu, Krav Maga, utilizing body weight manipulation and stuff like that.
So you got to go hand in hand.
Basically they add in, weapons, knives.
Yeah.
We call them woo on woo, weapons of opportunity, like whatever you have available, regular available. Yeah, I mean, rock anything you have available. It's just, it's like similar to some of the UFC concept. The basis of it has UFC concepts of a mixture of things. It's just significantly more violent.
Just about getting the job done at that point.
That's the goal.
Yeah. Hey, let's back up a little bit. So, Josh, you are a decorated veteran, and you are now on 100% disability.
Yes.
So let's back up and talk about the Wild Wild West. Are we okay with that?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Shoot away.
So, talk to us about your deployments. Where Josh is, full disclosure, Josh is in my men's Bible study on Wednesday night, and Josh was telling a story because I asked about, tell us how God protected you over there, and Josh started telling us some stories about how God protected you over there during actual combat. And you were just telling us stories upstairs about kids and things of that nature. I just want to open it up and ask you, Josh, tell us about the Wild Wild West. Tell us what actually went on over there that you experienced, that you're comfortable talking about.
Sure.
So that our people understand that these guys weren't just over there sitting in the sand, dude. Mm-hmm. I mean, there were guys that were dying. There were guys that were getting blown up. You were blown up. I mean, things of that nature. So tell us about the Wild Wild West.
Well, first and foremost, I kind of want to preface before I go into that. I feel like it's very important. It's a key point. It's pivotal, actually.
Right.
I'm gonna just back up right before I went to. So if you want to be an infantryman, you go through School of Infantry, and if you get tasked with a communications job, any other job, you go through Marine Corps combat training. Right. So I'm sitting in my top bunk, and I completed boot camp. Everything was done with that. I was just waiting for training to start before we went to our jobs for our schools. And I'm not afraid to admit and tell you, Josh Hemmings was absolutely terrified. What the hell did I get myself into? Yeah. Laying on that top rack, just looking up, missing home, being a big baby, just thinking, why did I get myself into this? I'm about to go to war. Am I crazy? And no joke, that Josh Hemmings is the guy that was having these cowardly, hey, maybe I should get a taxi and get out of here, kind of thoughts. And that was just the truth. It's something that's not anything you're really proud to admit, but that was just the bare bones facts and truth.
But don't you think anybody, Kev? I mean, wouldn't you think anybody would be that way?
That's just what I was about to say. I think that's just going to be human nature.
Yeah.
Right.
If you're just like, I'm ready to go in and combat, you might be a little, have a little psychopathic tendency.
Look, years ago, I had a kid in my youth group that got in some trouble in the military. Yeah. He was over in Iraq, and, he was taking pictures of dead bodies. This kid trained since I can remember him being a young man. He just wanted to be a SEAL. He wanted to kill people and that type of thing. And he ended up in Iraq. He ended up in trouble because dude had no conscience.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't think, and I think people watching are not going to go, oh man, Josh is a coward. I think that's, like you said, that's human nature.
That's very human, I feel, like that feeling.
The conscience is going to come into play a little bit as we go forward. But at the time I didn't have, for whatever reason, at boot camp, didn't have any issue. Was a squad leader. We had honor platoon. Anyways, that's boring stuff. Let's fast forward. After my 2 years, I served 2 years out in Okinawa, Japan, and that's where I did the. I guess the most exciting thing out there was that I tried out for the NDOC, but other than that, so now I'm at 1st Battalion, 8th Marines, and I'm really excited to kind of, at this point, after I've served 2 years in the Fleet Marine Force, I had gotten, at the time they put me on a board to get promoted a little early. So if they'll kind of evaluate the Marines that you have in your platoon, as I was in SWAT platoon, and they submit you, and then you go before a board, and anybody that's been in the military knows there's a lot of monotony. You got to drill, you got to know, stand in front of a board, uniform inspections. It's just like it's an honor. It's an honor. But sometimes when they tell you like, hey, you got 24 hours, you're going to be on a board, it's like, oh, my uniform's ready. I'm freaking out. Because the physical fitness tests, combat fitness tests, the work. So, got very blessed and was, I actually won the board over there. So I was meritoriously promoted to corporal, relatively early. Came to 1st Battalion, 8th Marines, which is what I wanted. I wanted to go to an infantry unit. Just because I loved the field for some reason. I just liked being out in the action, and was hoping to get to combat at that point. And let's see, my first tour. Let's say Iraq. There was a couple. We had several. I can maybe count on one, maybe two hands. Some indirect fire or incoming, but way outside the base of Al-Assad. We were at Al-Assad and Ramadi, and I can't remember the. Let's see what. I wasn't stationed there, so it really doesn't matter. But anyway, Al-Assad's a big air base. You hear stuff in the distance, but nothing like you're gonna get real. You're not gonna get your thrills off there, just because it was towards the end of the Iraq war, right. However, I did serve there for several months and got real close with little did I know the brothers that I would be serving with in the next several. So I was supposed to rotate out actually at that point after I got back from Iraq. Because it was time for me to do what they call a B-billet. Like, for example, you can be a recruiter. It's basically you get taken out of the fleet, you become a recruiter, drill instructor, security forces, something like that.
Yeah.
That's back what it was when I was in, at least. And I had just gotten my black belt martial arts instructor's certification. So I volunteered to go on that third one, second one that I count.
Yeah.
So I volunteered because I wanted. It's like I got a taste. I barely got a taste of anything in Iraq. I mean,
Right.
you know. So when I get to Afghanistan, I mean, it's day one. It's day one. Boots on the ground. You know, you're getting shot at. If you go outside, you kind of progressively get out further and further. You got your, bases that are, further in with the big chow halls. And then, you're getting closer to the front lines when the less crap starts popping up, and what takes you to, like, they'll start off, like, we go over in a commercial flight and, then we'll get like a C-130. Then you get in a Hilo or something like that, or Osprey or something like that. Yeah. And the reason we use Ospreys a lot is because the convoys they used to convoy us out there, but there was too many roadside bombs, IEDs, right. And it would just blow up the whole deal to smithereens. So they would have to fly us in, and we'd be dropped in at our forward operating post. We'd have our main 1st Battalion, 8th Marines had their main. I got to make sure I don't want to give one. And this is so far in the past, I doubt it matters. But anyways, I was in Helmand Province. I just want to make sure I'm being careful. I'm not getting. It's like,
absolutely.
So our 1st Battalion, 8th Marines were you would think I thought I was going to be working. That's where your support is, and then your infantry guys are spread out all through the front, and so me and 3 other Marine sergeants were selected to actually get attached to some of these line companies. Okay. And basically we were in charge of headquarters element platoon, kind of, and which is basically assets. It's not a real squad, infantry squad like I'd initially wanted, but I was selected to be the platoon sergeant.
Okay.
When lost our first guy was one of my dogs, Dog Gonzo. I couldn't tell you the exact day, but I believe it was week 2. And he was a double amputee, and I mean, but by the time we called QRF, that's a quick reaction force. Right. It's a force that kind of tries to come in either for backup or pull you out of there until if they don't have a bird that's in the area, or if a bird's catering to something else, or whatever it may be. But he ended up bleeding out, and that was.
Was he blown up?
Yeah, yes, sir. He was blown up, but
so
there's a difference. Yeah,
you guys driving somewhere?
Yeah, okay. So there's a difference between like getting blown up and then getting blown up.
Right.
My buddy, I've been blown up with a vehicle in front of me, and everything's call it a car. You're better off going to call a wreck for the most part if you're in the right kind of vehicle. Okay, yeah, right. It doesn't sound nowhere near as bad as it sounds. Now your gunner might get hurt if not killed, but it just depends on how, was it a 40-pound IED? Was it 80-pound IED? Was it, and by that time we weren't using Humvees. It would have, if you drove a Humvee over it, now it could very well incinerate you real quick. So there's that type of blown up. So, which I've had some experience with, but that's, like I said, you get in a car wreck on 285, that's worse.
Josh, you realize we're talking about bombs and getting blown up, and he's saying,
Well, what am I?
car wreck on
it's like car wreck on
285.
285.
Just like no, but this is, but see, you're talking about a world that we don't understand,
most people don't.
and most people out there don't understand.
Right.
And I just think it's quite amazing. So tell us about Doc.
So Doc, so basically, you had several different types of their best. The Taliban, the way they like to usually go about it, at least while we were in Helmand Province, first Battalion Marines, it was different. Them and Al Qaeda they fought differently. Some of them were more aggressive, but couldn't shoot for shit. Couldn't shoot for crap. Well, they would just get high on opiates and just go run out in the street and start spraying. Or sometimes.
Right.
No, don't get me wrong. They had some better trained guys, but it was just kind of like, for lack of better words, target practice.
Yeah.
The Afghans, there were a lot. In my opinion, my experience with them, they knew they had a disadvantage of coming at us. And the first time I'll never forget the first time I got shot at was, I'm getting ahead of myself. Doc Gonzo, he stepped on an IED, but it wasn't a pressure plate IED. It was, I believe it was a ripcord IED. So, and then you've got your RC IEDs where, they can click the radio button and just goes off. Yeah. And they'll use those as they see a platoon crossing on patrol, and try to spot a radio operator comm guy. Yeah. Try to spot. Basically, they would be smart to do it while in the middle of the formation, or try to spot the leader of the platoon, whatever. Right. It just depends on their strategy.
Yeah. So they would call in a comm. They would try to hit the comm guy, so then you guys can call in for backup.
Right. That would be one of their strategies. Yeah. Now, I'd go into S1 or intel, and I would try to get the intel on the Taliban and the area, kind of what as much information as I could suck out of them to know the enemy. I would, because
now, how would you do that? How would you go in? Is this where you were talking to me about the kids and things like that?
So basically, I wasn't at the big base in Helmand Province where 1st Battalion 8th Marines were. I was out with Bravo Company with the Marines. Yeah. We were covering a very large area of operations. Alpha Company was one place. We were in one place. Bravo Company was in one place, and then Alpha Company was in one place. Right. So, I forget where I was going with that.
Well, we were talking about Doc, but then we switched to just talk just a little bit about the intel.
Where you're getting.
So Doc. So Doc he ended up bleeding out. That's how. We tried 2 tourniquets, just didn't work. Yeah. And in a way, just to kind of caveat, anybody that I lost over there that I've known or were friends with, mentally, you prepare yourself, and psychologically, what I would do, and this is really messed up, what I would do is I would look at my best friend in the platoon, who I would go out and party with, was over at my house, whatever. I'd pick out a couple of them in my head, and I'd just run through scenarios of worst case scenario deaths on them, and I would replay it psychologically, trying to numb my, so numb senses kind of get, and there's a couple other things
for just in case it happens.
Well, yeah, because the bottom line is, you were here to do a job. Yeah, it's. Yeah, I get Marines won't agree. Of course, there's times if we didn't have a job to do that I would have grieved and mourned. But when you're in combat, that's just not the right time. Yeah. You give your guys a few minutes if you can, and it's back to business as usual. And if you got to clean up, you got to clean up. And it's got to be very matter of fact, because you don't know the next time you're going to get in a tick, and your mind needs to be as focused as possible, because one small increment second, could be the difference in everything. And
so can I ask a question? And I think this is relevant. So Doc gets blown up by an IED.
Right, and
you guys are trying tourniquets. You're trying to get him. Is he conscious at this point?
Unfortunate thing about Doc is that he had his, he was our doc. Yeah. He was our doc, and he hid his morphine, because you got to make sure that, Marines with idle hands or get bored. Had to hit it. So nobody knew where his morphine was, except for a couple other people, myself, and I forgot to tell, I forgot the squad leader that day, but I forgot to tell him where it was, because I had to go to the main operating base to pick up cryptophil for communication radio. But from what I understand, it was around 30 to 40 seconds, and he was gone. Wow. So that's been processed. All that stuff is, you wouldn't. I wouldn't have signed up or took an oath if I didn't expect certain things to happen. Sure. And I love every single one of my Marines and sailor that is not here with us right now. In my opinion, they're the ones that. It took me a very long time not to feel guilty taking any money. I had to. There's a lot of things on my claims that I just at first I didn't feel hardly anything, and then I had a platoon sergeant at the time saying, like, I know for a fact that you have other stuff wrong with you. My thing was I just felt guilty collecting a paycheck when there was guys that came home and it was just one of those things. But that's besides the topic.
And real quick, I would feel that all that suppressing, basically that grief, right? Because your adrenaline's running, you kind of understand in your head, right? Because guys are like that, very analytical. We understand what's happening. But I feel like that grief would, like when you come down from that high of the adrenaline, I feel like that grief would probably start overwhelming people over time, right?
Right. Yeah, and I expected that from my platoon, and I was okay. I would be okay with that. Well, once I started, they actually started letting me. Once I got exposed to some firefights and they saw I knew what I was doing a little bit, they even let me lead several combat mounted patrols, several, and mounted and unmounted.
Now, is this where you were talking about the rabbit?
I did do it this before.
Tell us about the rabbit.
Okay, so the
rabbit.
rabbit.
This is where I was, Josh.
And this will tie into kind of how the Taliban would fight you, a little more intelligent. There were better shots. Yeah. I'm telling you, my ear got nicked on my very first time getting shot at on Thanksgiving Day because I was making a bonehead move. And usually you can tell if you see, and over there in Afghanistan, guys, there's mopeds and everything, but it really looks like Jesus days. It's mud huts. Yeah. And if you see a village and it's women and children kind of doing a mass exodus, chances are somebody's coming in and it's going to be occupied really quick. So at any rate, the problem with that is they would have what we'd call kill holes, and there's a whole other ordeal with kill. Basically, a kill hole, you pop up and you can see a muzzle flash, but it's hard to zero in when you can't really aim in on somebody, or especially if you're 500 meters away or something like that. So what I would tend to do, I would never ask any of my Marines to do something I wouldn't do. And there was kind of like a technique, I guess. I never did it in training or anything like that, but I realized, well, the longer the muzzle flash goes off in that window, the more likely, I can have one of my Marines, go ahead and eliminate the threat. My thing was, let's do it ourselves. I was a little too aggressive sometimes. So at any rate, I call it rabbiting, and I would never make my private or private first class do anything like that. But what I would do is I would get two main positions. For example, we were one firefight. We had like a half wall, like just like a half wall, half mud wall. Yeah. I had a team of guys behind, and then I had a saw gunner and a few Marines up, probably, I don't know, maybe 35 meters away, roughly, give or take. And this is the first time I utilized it. So they're lighting us up, and they had outnumbered us at the time. I mean, we were a team out there just doing some just kind of doing like a little bit of mini recon patrol. I only had a small team of guys. So small team of guys. Well, we ended up getting we got into a villager's house, and they let us use the roof so we can kind of do some overlook or whatever. Well, we were on the roof, and we're just kind of laying down, just surveying the land, there was probably anywhere from 40 to 50. I mean, as far as shuttling them back and forth, and 40 and 50. Anywhere between 40 and enough to where it was okay. I just need to get enough to maybe knock off a few and head on back. Yeah. But then they started shooting at us, and when you're a Marine, the first thing that goes through your head is, who the hell does this guy think he is? I'm a United States Marine. I'll kill you. Like, are you crazy? So what I decided to do, rabbiting, I digress. Rabbiting, what I would do is I would tell one side, okay, I'm going to go from the point A to point B. I'd be under some type of cover at this point. Right. And I would assign several guys to different murder holes. So murder holes were like windows, like mud hut windows. Okay, so it's dark, you can't see in, but when the flash goes off, bam. Yeah. So the deal was, okay, I'll just run between this compound and this half wall, and hopefully they'll just try to light me up and pepper up the ground, and it'll be like fireworks. Get fireworks. And so at any rate, I had my iPod. This is a funny story. I had my iPod on, and one of my Marines, I was in the middle of rabbiting. Yeah. And once, and I knew we had gotten a couple. We didn't go out and get any, we bothered with any certified death. Yeah, they were, just because the way they were fighting, I knew they were lower level, Taliban, sure. Lower in rank, if not training, So, at any rate, I was trying to have as much fun as I could with it, but I had an iPod that was about that big, and I I put it in my grenade pouch, and because I had used it 3 days prior, and so I was like, I had my iPod there. I'm like, what am I doing? Not playing a song right now. So I pressed shuffle, and the first thing that came on, and don't ask me why this was on my playlist, it was given to me, was "Party in the USA" by Miley Cyrus. And
come on, Josh. Miley Cyrus.
I'm telling you. And then I got to my saw gunner. My saw gunner looks up to me. He goes, "Sergeant Hemmings, with all due respect, is that Miley Cyrus? Party in the USA?" I go, "Yes, sir. Yes, sir, it is." He goes, "Well, fuck yes." Oh, gosh. Excuse my language. Yeah. I don't know if we can edit that, but that was his exact quote. So at any rate, rabbiting was when I would try to draw fire, go between point A and point B.
So you would expose yourself.
I would expose fire. Right. And I typically do it if depending on the distance and if I would test and how close the rounds were impacting in the area and stuff, and I got pretty good at to where I could time it out, where I'd yell to my guys, hey, I'm about to hop over in a trench. They're gonna see me pop up, but I'm gonna get down too quickly for them to even get a shot off.
Right.
Now, in about 5 or 7 seconds, I'm gonna get up. They're gonna try to light me up.
Yeah.
Hit them, take them out, because they're gonna try try to light him.
And did you feel more comfortable doing this because you felt from your training, you felt that you knew that they were untrained?
Well, there's a couple of things about that. I was my base was calm at first, and there was a level of adrenaline. A, B, I was good at it. C, we were repelling the enemy's assault and having large success and being pretty aggressive with it. I wasn't risking any of my younger Marines' lives, and originally a communications guy, I felt like I kind of had something to prove. Like, hey, I can be. I'm just as brave or whatnot as you guys can be.
So you went from the guy sitting on your bunk going, what am I doing here, to
right and Marine
rabbit and really prove
right
the medal.
Yeah, and I've led some coordinate knocks where you basically rope off like a village of compounds, and no one goes in or out, and you separate everybody. You're looking for non-metallic ID makers, all kinds of bad dudes, so my point not in saying all that is that the company began to put and trust me more and more with bigger and bigger operations, and so what I want to kind of just before I forget it, because it's so important, between those several deployments, but specifically the combat deployments where I got medals of valor. Any military person, it's basically you get some medals for like a meritorious achievement, like well done in training, or you've done something really wonderful and you can get a medal for it even. But a Valor Medal is you get the medal because it's something you've done that was heroic or life-saving in combat. It's by the definition of a V. So I've gotten. I received a couple of those, and I don't say that to
well, we'll actually have them behind Kevin,
okay,
so people can see them,
and
you can actually read it. It's actually not called a Medal of Valor. It's
not a Medal of Valor. It's what I received is your Navy and Marine Corps. I received a Navy and Marine Corps accommodation medal.
Yeah, right.
That'll be, but my two with a V were my Navy and Marine Corps achievement medals, and I had 2 V's on those.
Oh, yeah.
So out of those tours, getting 2 V's is pretty decent. And I say that not to and to get Navy a NAVCOM, because those were meant for usually staff NCOs and up. It was quite rare you'd see a sergeant or below get one of those. But I say all that to say, like, look, this is, and it's not me bragging. Has nothing to do. And I'll be honest with you. I had a pride issue at one point. I had a pride issue, an arrogant, cocky pride issue. I would be joking and silly about it, but my heart was like, look what I did, look what I proved.
Sure.
And that couldn't be further from the truth. Every single, there's no doubt in my mind, and if we get to it today, we get to it, but that was every single medal I got, especially within combat or having to do with valor or anything like that. Any certificate, anything to do with bravery, anything good I got out of the Marine Corps, was the glory all, and not to be corny, but the glory seriously all goes to God. Because Josh Hemmings was the scared kid in the bunk bed, ready to jump ship after he swore an oath, was a coward. I mean, that my flesh was taken over. I was just a coward. Now, when I wasn't living as, I knew the Lord because I grew up in church, but I wasn't living as a Christian per se at the time, going out and party when you can, because you play hard, you work hard. Yeah. But when you get closer to deployment time, prayer time started increasing. Yeah. Because once I got to a point where it got to a point where I was kind of gravitated towards platoon sergeant roles, wherever I went in the Marine Corps, which was a blessing and a curse, because you gotta deal with you gotta protect, take care of the Marines, but you're also kind of that bridge to the, your higher ups and commands and stuff. And back me up. Sorry, sometimes my brain.
We have editing. It's all good.
Take your time.
What was I saying? I was saying right before that. Oh, the platoon sergeant second thing. Okay, so the platoon sergeant deal.
You're okay. Hey, let's do this. Let's go into. You had told me a story about one of the things that really broke your heart over there were the kids. This is what really got you. Can you kind of is that something you can talk about?
Yes, sir. Now,
so let me start by this, okay? Josh, you had told me a story a little earlier that one of the things that really broke your heart about being over there in combat were the kids. What happened with the kids? What do you mean?
Well, there's a couple events that, to be honest, I dealt well with. Before I go into the kids issue, I was about to, how I would train Marines as a platoon sergeant when I was going overseas, okay, is I would definitely I started making them, I said, look, you really need to get in the mental psyche that you're just not coming home. Have something ready for your, and the company would always make us go through our wills and all that stuff anyways, but I was talking about, no, really get to a state of mind to where you just know you're not coming back, like you're gonna die. And the reason that I would force that and pierce that into them is because it's really hard to kill something that's not afraid to die. It's really hard to kill something that's not afraid. And thank you. It's a Josh Hemmings original, I believe. Unless somebody's copyrighted. Unless somebody's copyrighted. But it was the truth, and that's one thing I also always kind of had in the back of my head, or the Lord had in the back of my head. Yeah. Because what the Lord did, and not only with the awards, the Lord gave me ignorant, uncanny bravery that I've not been able to match in any way, shape, form, or capacity in my entire life, except for being over there. Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. There's moments when you're fearful or scared, but for me, it was the times where it would be quiet and our convoy would break down and we hear on the radio that there's Taliban en route and it's dark and we're trapped in between a village and they're about to surround us and none of the communication works in between each vehicle. So I order everybody to stay inside the vehicle and I'll be the communication and hop between each vehicle. I was scared there. I was fearful there, but I could be wrong. But most of the time, I don't ever really remember being. I just remember just being.
Are you a machine?
Like almost like programmed. Like knowing what to do. Kind of like with a martial arts. It's like the muscle memory. You just kind of, you can kind of just. It's almost like you're an autopilot. Yeah. And you just kick in.
I've been told that's from basically the adrenaline and then your duty to your fellow soldier.
and we had a close group of guys.
Yeah.
So, we lost some in the deployment due to blowing up limbs, but they'd make it. Blown off ankle, getting shot in the shoulder or whatever, and then ones that just didn't end up making it back. Never really had a problem struggling with that until, and here's where the cowardly Josh comes in. I wouldn't go to their funerals, memorial services, and that's something I deeply regret because I was running. Yeah. And I'll revisit that in a minute, but that'll segue. So I served under two different administrations, Bush and Obama. And without going into detail, each time you go over to Iraq or Afghanistan, and my third or fourth tour, I can't remember, my last tour to Afghanistan was one that they had asked me to go on because we were rotating so many combat sergeants. They didn't have hardly any combat ready sergeant, and we were getting a big, what they call a boot drop. There was just going to be a lot of new faces, not a lot of combat ready guys. Sure. So again, I wasn't going to be in my MOS, which was a wire guy, and so I was fine with that. So at any rate, rules of engagement changes. Now, rules of engagement, ROE, basically tells you it's basically like rules of any kind of, like a football game has rules. Yeah. It's got a playbook. What you can do, what you can't do. Basketball, they've got rules, what you can do, what you can't do. When you're fighting in a war and you fight for the United States, you have a code of conduct that you have to hold yourself up to. So, without giving too much detail, my last tour, the rules of engagement got very frustrating for a lot of us.
During Obama.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah. Just due to the fact that we didn't know who we were fighting over there as it was. Yeah. Okay. Now I had a clear idea just because I learned very fast to be buddies with intel buddies before you get into country, because they'll tell you what counter intel's telling them, who they're sniffing out good, who they're sniffing out bad, and they'll do that. So it just made our job. It made our job a lot harder, and it made them a lot easier to put one of us down. Well, for example, I'll just give you an example. For instance, you could watch a man like 20 feet away walk in to a compound, pick up an AK-47, see his face, watch him shoot one. Now, this isn't a true story. This is a true story, but it didn't happen to one of my Marines. Shoot and kill one of your Marines in front of you, and him dip out of the compound and he was set his AK-47 down inside the compound. 100% the same guy who walked out, and you couldn't touch him.
This was the rules of engagement that changed under that administration.
That was one of them.
Yeah,
that was one of them. You had to have positive, 100% positive identification. Like before, there were certain things that were, and I got to be careful not to get myself in trouble here too, because I just got to be. I'll just leave it. It was just more. It was much more. I'm just going to leave it at this. It was much more difficult to do our job. It was much more difficult to engage people we knew were engaging us.
Yeah.
And I'll kind of live it right.
Okay. Did
and
everyone look the same?
And the reason everybody looked, you didn't know who you were fighting. There was no uniforms. The uniforms that they did have was the Afghan National Army that stood up, and the Afghan National Police that stood up, which were two worthless. I mean, 85% of them were worthless, and you can't trust them that they're not working for the Taliban anyway. and I've got other unresolved issues as far as they go, but infuriating ones. But I actually have more distaste for them than I do the Taliban, and that's the God's honest truth. So just it made it a little more difficult to kind of get your job done, and me and my buddies, I mean, we just got, we're an aggressive bunch. We're typically like a more aggressive, type. The Marine branch as a whole, we're not meant to sit back and play defense. We want to come in, knock your teeth out, not go sit back on the stool and wait for the next round, but take the tip of the spear and put it through the heart of the next town or whatever we're going through, and let the Army or whoever else clean it up.
Well, it's also fair to say that you wanted to be the giver, not the receiver.
Right.
You wanted to be the aggressor because honestly, if you're in a country you don't know, you're put there by your government to do a job, and then you are having your hands tied behind your back, so to speak. Now you're not the aggressor, you're the receiver, and now it's like, okay, so what am I even here for?
Right.
So then it has to demotivate the men and the women that are over there fighting, who have left their homes, left their families, left their lives. They're over there to do a job, and now you're even being told you can't even do it.
And it seems to be putting you at more risk.
Yeah. Well, that's huge.
Well, first off, both are 100% correct and right. But what I would have to do, at least with my guys, is I would have to have basically a powwow after the rules of engagement. Hey, this is going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. If I heard any political talk, left wing, right wing, any of that, I shut it down 100%.
Yeah.
Now, 98% of the time, they were right, and I'm agreeing with them.
Right.
But they needed to worry about their brothers to their left and their right.
Yeah, you're not.
What's important is that we are here now, and we need to get back to our families at this point.
This is the rules.
Finish it. Right. So, and the reason it is because your morale will get. It's crazy. You got to have. I want them to maintain that killer instinct, because if you don't feel like you're fighting for a good cause, or if you don't feel like you're fighting for, it can either slow somebody down. You might have a deserter. I mean, I'm catastrophizing some things, but I'm just, those are all possibilities. So now, part of the ROE, now the rules of engagement and toning them down, and us not being as aggressive or whatnot, a lot of it came into what they call, and a lot of veterans will. We can't stand this term, is winning hearts and minds. Winning hearts and minds is basically getting the hearts and minds of the village people on your side before they get on the Taliban side. Yeah. So part of doing that, we have certain projects. I was involved with calling in several mass casualties, but none were bigger than we had. We had a school we just put up, and in a school, it was basically a tent, a glorified tent with some benches in it, because it's what we had to work with over there. But it's something where they can learn and go, and they didn't have it before. So we're doing we're not doing like the humanitarian stuff. Some of the other guys, I don't know if engineers were doing it or what, but we would go provide security while they would set up and all that kind of stuff.
Contractors.
Right. And me and a lot of my guys, we get close to some of these kids because for a couple of reasons. Well, some of them were little jerks and they'd peg you in the head with a rock. They didn't care. Just being a kid, though.
Yeah.
Some of them, if you were nice to them, they give you good intel. They tell you they see somebody digging down the road.
Right.
So.
And what'd you have to give them for that?
Most of the time they want a chocolate.
Chocolate.
Chocolate. Shampoo. You got shampoo somewhere or somewhere? Or smell? They say smell good. Chocolate, but they'd always say chocolate. Or so usually a chocolate bar would do it, or just sitting down and playing a game, trying to teach them cards with our interpreter there.
Wow.
So
probably think about how important like something like that they don't have really open like a chocolate bar,
right?
You know,
yeah,
like that,
I mean, you would have thought it was.
We're so disconnected from that,
and the chocolate bars were terrible too. They tasted like somebody sat on them for 7 years. I mean, they were terrible. I mean.
So it's not even good chocolate to our fighting men.
But again, compared to what they're used to,
they loved it, and I would trade it for intel. Of course you had to be careful. I would check it. I would check it with some of our intel and counter intel, and you want to look for consistency best you can. You don't want to go off of what a 6 or 7 year old. I mean, for all we know, the 6 or 7 year old's just coming from. Taliban town might have given him a freaking what's equivalent to $100 bill and say, "Hey, tell him we're going here. We're gonna go. We're going behind him." So, unfortunately, the unfortunate part about that is, and I have always had a soft spot in my heart for kids, for children. So some of the long story short, the school got hit, and a lot of the school got hit one time. There was one incident where they were trying to shoot an RPG into our ECP, our gate, and it fell short, and where we were at the time, we were right across from a village, and it fried. When I say fried, I mean it jacked up.
Sure.
About 20 people in that village, and maybe 14 of them were children. Children with. When I say they were jacked up, I mean their insides were outsides. Yeah. But some of them were still living. And
so you guys, when this happens, you guys are all running towards this too.
Well, you gotta. So you'd have to train smart, just in case. I wouldn't just charge right in. Yeah, right in. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things. It could be a trap. It can be. I mean, there's a lot of things. And the frustrating thing is that the guys that are bringing them in are just probably good Afghanis, like uncles of the people that are bringing them in on bed sheets. But I've got to stop them and make sure a couple of my Marines search the guy, make sure he doesn't have anything on him before we bring him on base to put him on a litter so I can put him on a bird. Right. I mean, I remember there was one day I ran back and forth. The Fort Operating Base was about 800 meters, so about 8 football fields worth from where our LZ was to where our ECP was. So we got a lot of these guys coming in, and I'm not going to go into too much more detail, but the one that I just I was pretty close to one. It was one that he wanted to grow up. He wanted to be an A9 guy, but he just liked the Marines. He was my car buddy, and so he would always I'd be checking on my Marines on post, and making my rounds, inspecting what you expect when you're not on patrol or whatnot. And if I'd have time, I'd sit down and play some cards with the guy, and. He was one of the ones who came through the gate. And I just wasn't expecting it. I conducted it business as usual, but I can remember he came in on a bed sheet, and this kid's about 9. He's about 9 years. I think he was around 9 years old, and his intestines were just out. His intestines are out, completely out of his body. Wow. So. First thing I'm doing until Doc can get over there to check him, I'm sifting through as fast as I can, his internal. I'm checking for internal bleeding. Sure. Until Doc can get there. But I remember, for whatever reason, out of all that, and then the school mass cash was horrifying. But I remember he was kind of coming in and out, and I remember I had my security set up, I had my searcher set up, and then I had my guys that were tending to the civilians that were getting me the information I needed to call in a bird. Right. You know, who was a priority, who wasn't, yada yada. I ran back and forth from the flight line to the ECP that day within an hour and a half, probably 22 times at least. It's written somewhere. I think it was 20 or 21 times. But I was busy. So, but I remember this kid. I remember I was holding his head once our main battalion surgeon got there, and I just kept saying, "Come on, son, come on, son." And I had on my last tour was when I was pregnant. My wife at the time was pregnant with my very first baby girl. Hadn't even come into the world yet, and I was just so drawn to this kid. I'm just like, "Come on, son, come on, son." And he almost felt like he was. I remember the beads of my sweat from where my helmet and Kevlar were would drop, and it would hit him on the forehead, and that would every drop. If it dropped, he'd open his eyes like that, and it'd give me a little bit of hope. And he was just he was a very cool young man. Yeah. And so that's as far as the kids go. That's about all I'll go into. The rest of it I got to keep kind of close to the chest and between me and the Lord, just because I got little ones at home and I don't want. But my point
is tough. I mean, you know, this is tough. Can I ask? Did the little 9-year-old boy, did he make it?
No, sir, he did not. No. About. He was 25 seconds from getting on the bird. I mean, he still had a 15-20 minute flight. So I mean, he was going to make it anyway. But
we appreciate your courage to talk about it.
Right? This is hard to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, it's funny. It's strange. Some of the stuff's fun, even though some of your guys got banged up. It's not what you wanted, but I mean, it's what you signed up for. You're expecting something.
You don't sign up for the kids.
You don't. Yeah. I that's something that I didn't quite take into account.
I don't know how you can prepare yourself for that. That's one of the things about war that's not so black and white. I mean, they can portray certain things in the movies. But things just aren't always so clear cut. Right. And I know a lot of men. Most of my buddies and Marines are a heck of a lot braver and smarter and way more better Marines than I was. Yeah. Way better. They'd be a better shot, but I would get an award because they were making me look good. So, so there's some awards that's why I didn't even bring some of the binder stuff, just because most of that stuff is like, okay, I got an award for being a coach and speaking some letters. They got the job done. They got the firefight done. They won the deal.
But that's also, let me just say this. That's Kev. That's also humility.
Yeah, 100%.
Because without that coordination, without that guy that's moving people where they need to be, you are not going to accomplish the objective. So let's
a true leader also understands that he's nothing without the people that
absolutely
behind him.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
So let's transition. Now you came home. You came home,
mm-hmm.
and Is this when you started having problem with alcoholism and all of this?
When I came home in between tours, I definitely drank. I partied in between tours, but I can honestly say like I didn't really have any. I don't ever remember really having. Now, when I got back, I made sure that there were certain Marines that would get counseling because like my first several tours, I didn't even have. I didn't have a family at the time, so I was devoted to once we got back. Okay, now let's unpack this with your family.
Right.
First off, with you, how was so and so's death affecting you? Are you okay? Unpacking it, making sure, and a good way to keep accountable of that is you do monthly. Some when you first get back need it every week, a check-in kind of, but it just depends on the Marine, varies. But at bare minimum, at least a month when you get back. And once you know that they're good with like as far as loss of life that we might have had over there, then you've got to focus on something what I'm going to be hoping to raise some money for here soon. You know, guys got wives, and guys come back one way and they return a different way, and you know they put us through some decent training. Like the women that have husbands that go over there, I mean they have my utmost respect. So they kick more butt than honestly some of the Marines I've trained.
Yeah.
They're running a whole platoon of kids by themselves and just keeping the house afloat, bills afloat, everything afloat, anything that comes up, they handle it.
If their husband could
Not knowing
And
any
that's
time.
important at home where the husband
Correct.
is going to be there.
And you got to keep in mind living in a town where they're not around their immediate friends. You know, they're deployed. They're stationed with you. No, they make friends with Marines' wives, of course, but there's a little bit difference when you don't have mom or dad or any kind of family down. So it would be, and I ended up eating my own words on this. My guys would kind of have, some of them would have the mentality of, she just doesn't understand what I've been through. She doesn't understand what it's like, or she doesn't. She's had it easy, freaking. It disgusts me, blah blah blah, and I'd have to be like, whoa, slow your roll, brother, slow your roll. Yeah. And now I would never talk to their wife just because of the training and stuff that we had like as leaders. You got to stop them in their tracks there. And boy, how hypocritical that was, because at the time, honestly, in between, I was so busy. My turnarounds were. I had maybe a 6-month turnaround was the fastest, maybe 6 or 7 months, and then 9 months was the longest turnaround. I don't know, some of my buddies might correct me on that, but we didn't have a full year. Now our deployments were a little bit shorter, right. 6 to 8 months, depending on which one. So you had to go through the counseling and all that stuff, and then, so I'd do that, make sure my Marines, I would try to make sure my Marines that were, that actually saw combat, and were hooking and jabbing on a regular basis, or especially guys with TBI, if they got blown up, if they were unconscious, because there's several things you just need to be aware of when you're back. And then, so I don't know what it was. I guess my brain was just, I kept it so busy, and between each of my tours, I don't remember having any symptoms until 5 months after I got out of the Marine Corps. And, oh, I'm sorry, 5 months it was 5 months after my last tour in Afghanistan. That was my first time.
You're transitioning home. Let's kind of recap for everybody. Yeah. So you're transitioning home. You're not going back.
Right. At this point.
After your last tour, and now 5 months after, you start dealing with what?
First started with nightmares and night terrors. I didn't really know that, and that's what my
If you explain the difference when you do that.
My wife, and I would be told by at the time my spouse. Sometimes I wouldn't know. I would just be flailing around in the bed, and I just wouldn't know. And what I would begin, I take that back. I would remember a nightmare for me, and this could be Josh's own definition, but for me, and I have since been divorced, so I've got a wonderful wife that handles it. It's a blessing. I mean, she's just, that the amount that they've gone down and the way she handles me, and it's an amazing. And she knows the difference between the terrors and the nightmares, and so he blessed me. So, but at the time, it was very new. And this was my first spouse. My first spouse, she would, tell me I was elbowing her and kind of, kicking her, and not. She's like, you hurt me kind of a couple times, but not like hurt, But and I would be like, oh well, yeah, I was kind of, because I remember my nightmare. Now they started to spot it seemed like the longer and longer it got. From deploying, or because this is the first time my hands are like, what? I don't have any Marines to train. I don't got to go to deploy. I don't got to get. It's like, what do you do with your hands? Ricky Bobby, what do you do with your hands? So the night terrors are a little bit trippier. They seem to be more intense, and then when you're waking up, it's almost like you're half awake, half asleep, and you're kind of having to kind of get back and even visually get back to kind of reality.
Right. Almost like, are you just kind of sleepwalking too? Are you getting up and moving around at that point?
Well, with me, I'm trying to think if I slept. With me, I don't think I slept. There would be times mine would be more so jumping up,
Yeah.
jumping up and getting down, and
so almost
stuff,
mimicking combat.
like it's taking nothing to hurt anybody.
Right.
But
I'm saying mimicking.
mimic it just because I would. Well, and sometimes it would be because I was dreaming over something, and for whatever reason, I dreamed in like night vision a lot.
Yeah.
Night vision a lot. And most of the fighting we did was during the day. I don't know why that was. And I will say this, when that would happen, it felt just really demonic. There was something demonic about the dream. I can't explain it. I'm not saying I saw Satan or anything. Yeah. I'm not saying that. It was just I'm sure several vets out there know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just hard to put your finger on what it is, to how hard it is to explain. So at any rate, you go through those. So what I would do, I found a solution at that point. Two things. 5 months, that's when I started the nightmares, and then 5.5 months is when I found out that the best Marine that ever served under me, that's Corporal Buford. He was the bee's knees.
Yeah.
A+ student overseas in combat. Which is weird because the people that struggled back home as a Marine usually thrive over there. Yeah, it's strange how that works out. But his bunkmate and his best friend, they were in my platoon. They were bunkmates, best friends. Yeah. I got a phone call from a lieutenant 5.5 months after we'd gotten back, and they were over at an PFC Hunt's apartment, Buford's best friend, and they were just wrestling around Marines fight all the time, even violently, whatever. Yeah. It's nothing new. Yeah. Drinking was involved. Buford had got the best of him, was just messing around. Buford goes to sit on the couch, and next thing you know, Hunt goes and pulls out a gun and ends his life right there on the couch in front of 2 or 3 other Marines. and that was a curveball. Because
How do you process that?
yeah, well, yeah, it's you're trying to get back. So after that, that's where I was like, okay, I think I can get I like partying. So what if I just take the partying and I just like try to cover it up, and I just drink all day? Because what I would find out is I would drink, and it got very heavy. I would drink and I wouldn't remember my nightmares. Now I would still have them apparently, because there would be movements, there would be stuff like that. I was still having them.
And your spouse was telling you.
Right, correct. Yeah. And she said it was often more violent, there was more movement, physical. Yeah. Right. So I was like, well, crap. I thought I had a cure for something, but then I got something during the day, because then all of a sudden I'm in the armory. They're counting weapons, or I'm helping out one of my buddies. Probably try, because I knew I was about to get out. I probably they call it skating, just hanging out, cleaning weapons or something.
Yeah.
Or it might have been having them count, but there was. I started having these real bad, like flashbacks, like hot flashes, like pouring sweat, and driving was very difficult. I don't know why that was, and I've talked to a couple of my buddies that I still stay in touch with to this day. It took me a good 6 months to get comfortable just to drive on the roads just again, and I don't know why.
Yeah.
There was just certain things that maybe had been pent up for so many points, and now they're all kind of getting let out of soda can, because I don't have my mind distracted off that adrenaline. Yeah. So, boy, did I ever, instead of running to a church or to God or to prayer, which what I know now to be the only thing that makes things better, first and foremost. And I've tried the extremes of both ends. Trust me. It got so bad to where I had even my drinking buddy best friends, to where I would just to get out the door in the morning, I would have to down a pint. Now keep in mind, I still have to do ignorantly. I still have to drive. Very dumb, very stupid.
Right.
Very ashamed of that. But then when I'd get on base, I wouldn't want my wife to find out. So I would beg. I would literally be in tears with some of my buddies. Please buy me this alcohol, because it can't show up on my card. Please, because I'd be either hungover or just not wanting to face what was coming or whatever.
Hey guys, so we need time for a second. Are we good? Okay, we're good. Okay, no, we're good. Okay, go ahead. Well, we're gonna edit all this, so no worries.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
A lot of ground covered now.
Yeah. I just said the alcohol.
My God was my alcohol, and I got up to during the weekday. I would do a handle of vodka a day, plus 2 bottles of wine. And the reason I would do it that Monday through Thursday is I would take the handle during the day. That would get me through the day at work.
Yeah.
And when I'd get home, I'd have 2 wine bottles opened up, manipulating, like, oh, I bought a bottle of wine for you, and immediately take a sip out of that first, because she didn't mind me drinking wine or beer. Right. So then I'd drink that, and I'm like, oh, well, that's the alcohol you're smelling. It's the wine. How deceitful it got. And
well, let's go into this, Josh. How long have you been sober now?
Sober now, in 2020, February 4th of 2020 is my last drink of liquor.
So we're looking at 3 years now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how are there
as far as liquor goes?
Yeah. Are there days now where you still, like, you had a bad day yesterday?
I had.
And I'm not.
Yeah.
This is not okay.
Oh, it's fine.
But
Yeah.
you told me
Yeah.
that anybody else would be drinking. What happened to you yesterday? Because we kind of opened up this can of worms,
Right.
And we were talking, and it brought along some feelings.
Do you want me to speak to the feelings aspect, or do you want me to speak to why I think what happened?
A little
happened?
of both.
Okay.
And,
Okay.
Yeah. So a little of both, but you don't have to go into
right,
super detail. Just a little bit.
So sometimes when I'm a Marine or any military personnel who's in combat, you wake up and there's just not a switch you can turn off your brain. You're depressed. You don't want to get out of the room. You don't want to get out of the bed. You can't. Sometimes there's not even a face to it. That's not an anniversary. Sometimes it's just you're in a switch is off in your brain to feel no dopamine, feel extreme depression, extreme anxiety, crippling anxiety. Panic attacks, and severe isolation. Sometimes you just wake up like that, or sometimes you won't wake up like that at all, and sometimes you'll just wake up completely with a huge ball of rage that you could just smash through a wall. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, since in my walk with Jesus Christ, when I had my first encounter with the Holy Spirit in 2017, that's changed my life.
Yeah.
And I still would stumble. I wasn't drinking as much. Like I drank 3 times in 9 months, and then, I mean, God, I went through a divorce at the time, and God sent me a woman I wanted to marry since I was 16.
Wow.
So I know he honored like me giving up my drinking and stuff for this woman, and so I say all that to say that those days don't happen not near as often today as they used to, and some of it, it sickens me to look back on some of it because it was just so selfish. Some of it you couldn't help, but then some of it, I look back at myself and I would tell myself, like, look, man, here's the deal. Yeah. Get yourself together. You have a wife. You got 4 beautiful kids. Like, you know. Yeah, yeah. But as far as yesterday, now it had been quite some time, and this is the God's honest truth. I never thought at one point in time that I would ever go through a day and be like truly happy unless I had some sort of vodka or I was drinking and I just didn't think that was just a possible thing. And not only is it possible and you can be sober in it, but what's crazy about that is now 99% of the time, if I see a beer, if I see liquor being poured or someone drinking it, the sight of it and thought of it literally makes me nauseous to my stomach, like sick to my stomach. Yeah. Like just, oh my gosh. It's almost like a lightning bolt. A lightning bolt comes down and like reminds me of my hangovers and everything. But for whatever reason, I believe I know the reason. I'm trying to start this nonprofit that.
Well, let's get into that. Because let's talk about where you're going. You mentioned a nonprofit that you are in process of. Tell us about that nonprofit and how we can. Is there anything that we can do to support that?
Yeah, maybe get the word
right. Well, yeah. I mean, I'm definitely going to be coming back, but I'm at the very. I've been praying to God. I know He's been wanting me in some facet or another to help with kids, but there's a major. Long story short, there's a major ordeal with men with great character, not even great character, men with good or okay character being in the home of a family for a child. What does that have to do with military? Well, it has a lot to do with the military. because what a lot of people don't realize is, I think I'd have to check with my buddy, but I might have lost more buddies to suicide since I've been back than I did in actual combat, and or drinking or driving or overdose, but suicide mainly.
Right.
All forms of suicide, really.
So you take that. So imagine that. Let's say that's 5 families right there. No more dad, and now you've got a mom. That's who knows what she could find, or if she would find anything. Not that a woman can't do it on her own, but there's a reason, and statistically, there's a reason why it's important. So there's that. There's focus on programs for wounded warriors, all that kind of stuff. But what a lot of people seem to forget is the fallout, the home front fallout.
Yeah.
And when I say a home front fallout, I'm talking about the guys that are committing suicide. I'm talking about the wives who this is their 3rd go round of their husband just going back and forth, because that's all he knows. Because he comes back. Like when I got out, I didn't have a trade. That's all I've been doing for years.
Yeah.
I didn't have a trade. I hadn't had a diploma. I was blessed. I can get a free degree.
Yeah.
But my point is you're almost left with like, I went from having the most important job in the world to emptiness. So, it's gonna be a nonprofit, a fundraising nonprofit that's going to basically help the needs of families that are dealing. For example, I can't count. I don't have the stats with me, so when I come back, I'll get you all that. But you should see the numbers for divorce when vets come back.
It's insane.
And once again, there's a male out of the family. So, I'm trying to combat basically the family unit and putting it back together, because to be honest, the hardest part was getting back. The hardest part. There were several hard things. If I could chew on some for long enough, I'm sure I could tell you that, yeah, there was some stuff that was way more horrific. But for the long scheme of things, by far coming home is to me has been the hardest.
Yeah.
Especially when you have a family.
Yeah.
And especially when.
Well,
so
can I say this? When you go from having your comrades, you go from adrenaline rush to adrenaline rush, dopamine.
Right.
You go from this lifestyle where you're training yourself not to remember, you're training yourself not to feel, you're training yourself to do a job and a job only. So now when you reintegrate into society, you reintegrate into that family, now you don't have any of that. Now you got kids that are getting up in the morning, they're running around, they're screaming, the wife is doing her thing. And you're lost because there's no more mission. There's no more objective. There's no more enemy. And so now all you have is this person or these people there that are home waiting for you that don't understand what your life has been on mission. Right? They don't understand that. While you understand,
nor do you want your kids to understand.
You don't want them to understand that. But there's this gap that's there. There's this emotional disconnect now because you're trying to catch up with where their life is, and they can't catch up with where your life has been because number one, you're going to block that. You don't want them in that. Number two, it's too hard to, and then number three, a lot of it you don't want to remember anyway. And so when a wife is sitting there going, "What did you go through? Tell me, talk to me."
Don't want to relive.
You don't want to. You don't want to relive that,
right?
And you don't want to burden her with that.
Her mind with that.
And in all of that, the one thing you do need is to be able to decompress and unload, and be able to have that person that you talk to. But our human nature is, I don't want to share it. I don't want to look weak. I've been this warrior. I've got, I've protected. I've done this.
Right.
And
People call me for help. I don't call them.
you call them. And for you to put your head on your wife's chest and just cry, that might seem weak, or to sit and just talk to her and let her know, this is what I experienced. This is what hurts. And she may not even know how to respond, but again, the Bible says, weep with those that weep and mourn with those that mourn. Sometimes what you need is human connection. And this is the one thing on Wednesday night that we try to do, is provide connection for men.
Absolutely.
And this is why my heart, when Josh 2 years ago was having a bad day, and you were trying to teach a Bible study, and quite honestly, you were just having a bad day. And I could see it. The Holy Spirit literally spoke to me. And everybody these men are just sitting there. And I'm like, dude, what are we doing? This is our warrior. This is our comrade. This is our guy. We're men. We're in a spiritual war. Let's get around this guy, put our hands on him, and let's pray over him, man.
I laughed because I could literally, I was like fiddlesticks. I could barely get 2 words out. Like, I wasn't reading. I was losing my train of thought.
Yeah.
What was I talking about? And the guys that know me know I can teach. Yeah. So I usually have a pretty good flow with things, and so that's why I was laughing. I was going through a rough day, but yesterday, to bring all, as far as I believe that not. And I've been going to my help with the VA and everything and all that stuff, but I think once the enemy started to see how motivated and serious I was about putting something like this in for motion, because there's still vets that I served with in combat, that were in combat, that aren't getting help and aren't getting paid as if they were in combat, which is crazy. So, and it's also for some helping for God plugging them to outlets to help them out too. So, at any rate, so it's a big.
I want to cover something, Kev. Listen to this. So you're 100% disabled.
Yes, sir.
Okay, you're not able to work.
That's correct.
Okay, so
I can't get what I was told. What I was told is I can't get 1099 anywhere.
Okay, so here's the thing. You've been missing back pay for how many years?
Back pay. Oh, that's a different. That's from the CRS.
Well, it's not just from. I'm not talking about just from being disabled, but from your military career. Didn't you have some issues with back pay?
Well, it was my combat. It was my combat related injury pay. It stopped. I was on what they call the temporary retirement list, and then I got transferred to the permanent retirement list. Well, for whatever reason. A year before I was put on the permanent retirement list, it's funny you asked that. I called about it 2 days ago. They've been issuing my because you get a little cherry on top if any or all your injuries came from combat and you get retired due to that very reason. So I was getting paid. It stopped, and so yes, I'm owed back pay for 6 years. About roughly $700 over 6 years.
$700 a week.
A month.
Okay. So, but this is money for your family. This is money that you guys need,
right? Which should be coming in soon. Yeah. I mean, I'm very blessed. I get.
Well, let's just talk real quickly about this thing that happened. So, you were going through this. You guys had a house fire. You lost a lot of your records, things of this nature.
Oh yeah, before I moved in with my wife.
And you lost a lot of your records, and you were worried. You kept trying. You're trying to work through getting this back pay that you and your family need, and you weren't able to locate. And you called this guy up, and this was just like a miracle from the Lord, man. And you called this guy up, and tell me how this guy. You told the story in men's group how he was like, hey man, you're a combat decorated veteran. We should be able to find this stuff. He found it and said, you'll have your money here soon.
So basically what had happened is, which is crazy, and you can even actually have it.
You can get it.
I got it somewhere.
Somewhere. No, it's all good, man. We can't.
Basically, what I needed back was, and you can see where it was. Okay, so it says I was retired on when. I'll hold it up. I was retired in 2017.
Yeah.
I got this documentation to submit to DEERS,
Right.
and so I could get the back pay.
Yeah.
It didn't come into the mail until July 27th of this year.
Oh my goodness.
So without this, and without that's what they needed for proof. And the thing is that it's going somewhere. It's going mystically somewhere, because I talked to my branch of service that is in charge of this. They've still been issuing it, and they've still been issuing it. They're like, "Are you still banking with Navy Federal?" I'm like, "Yes." And they're like, "Well, you're definitely not receiving it, but it's gone out every single month." So it's there.
It's in the
so they're basically, I don't know. I had to go up to Dobbins Air Force Base, get a couple things, get this back, and some of the stuff in my permanent retirement ID and all that stuff back in the system. TRICARE back in the system, which was a pain in the butt, just because.
Yeah.
But freak accidents happen. It was at my grandmother's house. At my grandmother's house, I was living at the time, in between divorces, and sure as crap. The house was built in 1935. When it rains, it pours.
Yeah.
But yeah. So yesterday, I had just real quickly, just to any of those of you who don't know who Jesus is, or doesn't know the gospel, or whatever it may be, or don't believe there's something out there. I'm telling you right now, it is just as much as a miracle that I'm not having vodka shoved down my throat every day than it is if somebody was paralyzed and he walked. Right. It's that serious, and I say that now. I also say that to say there's an enemy out there.
Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes we battle with our enemy. Sometimes we battle with our flesh. It's two different things. But yesterday, for whatever reason, it was the perfect trifecta of trifectas. I hadn't had any issues in a long time. No nightmares in a long time. Things were going relatively well, and it just hit. And there was nothing I could. And I was. I started having a panic attack. I was starting to ask for prayer, and
I was praying for you.
Right, and I texted you after, and he was praying for me, and I remember thinking to myself, because I pulled over because I was so jacked up and working myself up so much, and not only that, this thick blanket of depression and anxiety and just misery was over me. And it's like, look, man. And before I was in the service, and even while in the service, I used to never be able to understand how a man could kill himself, yada yada yada. I used to be a real big jerk about it. I don't condone it. I can 100% understand. I get.
You can understand what takes a man there.
Right. Correct. Absolutely. So, so yesterday was my first craving for vodka, and it didn't last. It didn't last that long, but it was scary because I felt like there wasn't that much more I could take.
Yeah.
And I just say that to encourage you. Look, when you're starting to go and you're up and up and come out of any cloud of darkness, whatever darkness it may be, whether it be you as a veteran or a wife or your children or whatever your situation. I'm getting texts from vets that got all kinds of crazy situations. I buddy him. I can't believe he's not getting any compensation. He's done 2 combat tours with me. It's just nuts. So when you start to do, I've noticed it for myself. When I started to getting better, with the Holy Spirit kind of came into my heart. Jesus started removing that stuff. Well, the enemy knew I was coming here today.
Sure.
I don't think there's any mistake that I don't believe in coincidences anymore. I'm not ashamed to admit that I've been to Peachford, which is a psychiatric hospital, several times, and was going what you would call crazy. But that's where I thought it's where I found my salvation. But I do believe, after talking to Pastor Tim, that I was saved. I was saved today, and I had my first Holy Spirit encounter at
Man, brother,
December
the
17th.
day you cried out to Jesus is the day you got saved.
Right.
You
So
know,
that would have been
yeah,
it.
you may not feel it and all of that stuff.
Right, I didn't
but
feel
it
anything.
Doesn't make it not
Nothing
true.
tingly or fuzzy.
Yeah, it doesn't
but-
make it not true, because you know what? It doesn't rely on a feeling.
Right.
And that's the thing. So here's the thing, man. We are really glad to have had Josh in today.
Amazing.
And,
Thanks for having me.
Sergeant
Powerful.
Hemmings, Sergeant Hemmings. Really, let me start that over. We are really glad to have had Sergeant Hemmings in today.
My pleasure.
He is a good friend of mine, and I really wanted to have him on, and now you understand why. But it doesn't stop here. While this podcast ends for you, Sergeant Hemmings and many like him still have PTSD, all the effects of being in battle and combat, that while your life goes on, their life still deals with it. Just remember, there are American heroes out there that suffer every day, and some kill themselves, some commit suicide that you don't even know about.
24 a day.
24 veterans a day kill themselves. Guys, that is the real struggle. These are warriors that protect our freedom, and they deserve our utmost respect. Josh, thank you for coming in today.
I thank y'all for having me.
This-
I appreciate the
Very
platform.
powerful.
Yeah, this has
That's
been...
That's healthy. It's healthy for me too. So thank you.
Yeah, you're helping.
I appreciate it.
With your story, you're helping a lot of other people.
Guys, again,
Well,
thank
so-
you. This has been Impact.
The impact.